So, hello everybody. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, everything.
Okay. So I'll just start. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I wish I had had the chance to come to Moscow, and maybe soon that'll happen. I remember, well, I had a flight last year to come, and well, maybe September there might be an opportunity to come as well. So what I'm going to talk about is publication process, what authors are facing, and who am I? I'm an author, and my colleague Olga Chubb is an author, and we're working together on catalysis. So typically, I'm a chemical engineer working particle technology, catalysis, biomass, lithium iron phosphate. But we also have been looking at writing and publishing and seeing how to pursue this. So I work at the Polytechnique Montreal. It's a French university. Okay, can you hear me now? I don't know what happened. Okay, so so writing and publishing is something that we have been pursuing in the last 10 years and trying to look at it from an engineering point of view. But what I wanted to do today is look at, let's see, what are the points of view of authors and editors, publishers, and the open access. So the idea is to have a discussion about what's going on when we publish. Okay, and just as a conclusion is that publishing is not gratifying. When I write, in fact, sometimes I really have fun. But when it comes to the actual publishing process, it's not so fun. And so the question is, what is going on, and why is it like this? And I guess a lot of people are looking at publishing and then publishing as a means, publish or perish. So it's a stress of publishing. What we wrote an article, we called it Publish and Flourish. That publishing should be an act of creativity. And unfortunately, writing is creative, but publishing is not necessarily. And so I wanted to talk about that with you. Then we're going to look at editors and the editor's point of view. And, you know, is there a bias? You know, is there an English language bias and an institution bias? And how do we break that? And then reviewers. I'm sure you've all reviewed something. I review 3 papers a month, and often I'm critical, but whenever I'm critical, I always have to identify why. And I think reviewers need training because they don't understand how much they affect, you know, the mental health of the people they're reviewing. And so this is something we've got to talk about. Publishers. Now, this is interesting. I mean, if you look at Web of Science or journals, citation reports or Scopus, they will tell you how many publishers there are, and you know, what's interesting is that 5 companies, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Wiley, Sage, and Nature Springer, they have 55% of all the articles. And if you look at 30 publishers, they got 75%. And then if you look at the number of citations, it's well over 80%. And so the question is, do they have too much power? and they can dictate how the community, and are they taking their responsibility of this power? They also have responsibility, and are they acting responsibly? And some people have a view that they're not, and so it's spawning other, let's say, publications, other journals, other publishing houses. But what's interesting is that these new up and coming publishing houses, we treat them as predatory. And so is that even fair? So let's say 30 years ago, a lot of these journals could have been considered predatory. And so we've got to change, or understand how we're treating new journals that are trying to break in. And there are predatory journals, and I don't want to go into those, but I would like to try to explore how we can be more equitable. And then open access, okay? The open access, there's a promise of citations for money, meaning you pay 3,000 American and you get published. And that's something I'd like to talk about a little as well. Now I have a chat here going on. What does that say, Olga? Okay, it's not for me, good. Okay, so let's talk about the authors, okay? So someone asked, how is the paper writing going, okay? And this is a question I asked my students. I said, okay, guys, where are you? And they might say, well, we're almost done. And what does almost done mean? Okay, I mean, we've got 90% left and 10% because you've got the outline. And so the question is, how do you even know when you're close? And so this question, how's it going? Well, that's a really tough question. I mean, it's not obvious. So recently I asked my friends and colleagues as well, how long does it take to write a paper? How long does it take? So I've finished my research, and now I said, okay, all my research, which I don't agree with. You always write while you're working, okay? Never wait till the end, because as soon as you get to the end and you start writing, say, oh shoot, I should have done this, I should have done this, and then you go back. So always write. But if we just talk about the writing process, how long does it take? Okay. And then what does it take? I mean, what is it? What are the elements of it? So I consider writing like climbing a mountain, okay? And so what we did is we identified like 15 activities of publishing, not the research, just the publishing or the writing, okay? And we said that, okay, if you look at, you've got the easy stuff, the title is probably one of the first things you do. You might change it, but title, let's say call it 2 hours. Introduction, 20 hours. Experimental, 30 hours. So this is a summary of 40 people, students, senior researchers, intermediate researchers, and I edited it a little bit, but let's say it takes 30 hours just to get to the experimental, okay? So 30 hours, that's like 1 week of work. Then we go to the next, the next steps, and what do we got next? Well, we got the figures. Figures, we say, well, like figures 4 hours, and if you got 10 of them, that's 40 hours. Well, let's call it 30 hours. Then we got results, discussion, another 10 hours each, tables, 10 hours, conclusions. We're at 100 hours, and we're at the conclusions. I mean, guess what? We're tired. We're tired. And that's what I think that's, it's an exhausting task, and we've got to understand that it is an exhausting task. And then from there, we said, okay, we're pretty good to go. Now what do we do? So now we go into, well, the abstract, I say it's 5 hours, it could be longer, but the abstract, usually I'm writing the abstract, the first thing in the middle, and then I change it, and I come back and I change. So it's a iterative process, okay? But then you get into what's going on with the journal, okay? And so here we've got letters to the editor, okay? And then you've got the graphical abstract, and then you've got the highlights, okay? The highlights here, graphical abstract. And then the submission process can, it used to be a lot longer. It used to be at least 8 to 10 hours. Now it's 3 to 4 hours, maybe 5 hours. And so you've submitted it, okay? And then what happens is you get what? You get your rebuttal, okay? You get revisions. And that can be easily another 20 hours. So you've spent like 130 hours, and then they come back with these comments from people that you've got to deal with. So we're looking at 150 hours. It's like 1 month of work to get out of paper. So what we asked, the next question we asked, well, like, what are you enjoying? What do you enjoy about writing? Okay, and so we divided these 5 topics into the 15 into 5 topics. And so you got the writing and synthesis. So I asked all these individuals and said, okay, if you love it, you give a 4. If you hate it, you give a 0. And so what you get is that the abstract, people gave it a 2.5 out of a 4. And then introduction, they liked that a little bit less. Then conclusions, they didn't mind that out. So the writing of the synthesis is a score about 2.3, okay? Then we've got writing the research part. This seems to be more enjoyable. Writing the results was, people liked that. Some people detested it, but a lot of people liked that. So this is the highest score, 3.2 in the like index. And then we've got the article feature. So your references and your tables, people don't like doing the references or the tables, but figures, well, I enjoy figures. So that's fun. So that's like number 3 in the like for these 40 individuals, but still some people don't like it. So here, if you look at the scale, so you've got 0 responses. So this corresponds to almost 30 people said that they liked writing the abstract. And then here it was 22 people said they disliked writing the introduction. For the references, you've got people that were more close to the 30 that they didn't like it, okay? And then there's some things to do with the journal, okay? So we've got article, the highlights, the graphical abstract, and the title. So titles are fine, but the highlights and the graphical abstract were out here at 30. More than half the people either were ambivalent or they didn't like it or they detested it. Okay. And then you've got the last thing is communicating with the journal. So this is like the submission process, letter to the editor, and rebuttal. So this is like, nobody loves submitting it. Letters to the editor, maybe 2 people liked it, but these things were things that people were not really fans of. So this is how I characterize it. It's like writing the introduction is like glorious. We are just wind in our hair, we feel like movie stars. But when it comes to the submission process, the rebuttal, we're no longer on the grand piano. We're on a little piano like this, and we're not feeling good about ourselves. And so this is annoying. Now it's all about, how you spend your time. I mean, right at the beginning, you got a lot of energy, and at the end, it's like you're running a marathon. So if I reorganize this in terms of time, the title, results, the figures, these are the things that we do at the beginning. So this is the joy, okay? And then the things that we do at the end is the drudgery, okay? So this is the rebuttal, the submission, all those things at the end. So it's like, if the journals could make this process a little bit easier, then we could feel like this a little bit more and a little bit less of the right, okay? So this is what we're driving for, is to feeling like we're with a grand piano. So we've written the article. We've submitted the article. What's next? Well, it's the reviews. And so this is something else that is, it's tough. Just how long does it take for a review? Okay. It's like, I mean, this is a long process. Now, the thing is, the journals, they got to understand that they have an impact. It has an impact on us waiting, okay? Some of it's a promotion. I remember seeing in our comment in Facebook, they said, look, I have a paper, it's almost submitted, it's almost accepted, but I might not, I might not get a promotion, I might get hired. So, if we're waiting, this in the case as well, that we might not get a prize because we haven't got that article. But I think the most important thing, these are important things, but it's motivation. Okay, so your motivation kind of drops. If you're waiting a long time to get yourself published. And so motivation is a huge factor. And and that's a factor in our enjoyment. And so editors, they have a responsibility. We just spent 140 hours, 130 hours. Does it have to take a year? In fact, one of my colleagues here, well, we've been waiting 1 year. And we made minor changes. There were minor changes, and we're waiting a year for. So it's demotivating. And editors, they have a responsibility. So let's see. So now, waiting is one thing. Reading the rejection letter is something else. Okay. So if you wait a year and you get rejected, I think it's unethical. If you wait a lot of time, you get rejected. Whatever the time is, the rejection letter has got to be something better than what we're doing, because after the rejection letter, this is how we feel. We just spent 120 hours and it's like, what? How can this be? How can you reject this? My work is phenomenal. So we're like Godzilla, okay? And, it really, my suggestion is when you get your rejection letter, just read it and then go away for 2 or 3 days as you can, you're the Incredible Hulk, you become the Incredible Hulk, and then you come back after a couple of days, say, okay, what were the comments? Now, when it's a rejection letter, that's what's really tough. Okay, so we're gonna go over this rejection letter, and this, I think, is something, again, editors got to do a better job. So here, dear Dr. Peyshens, we don't know if you have a PhD, but it's better to stroke your ego just in case. Thank you for submitting your manuscript entitled Supernovas. Okay, we regret to inform you, not really. And the not really is, I work with a journal that has a low impact factor, and the journal rejects 3 out of the 4 articles that they receive. So it's at the 50 percentile in terms of impact factor, and it only accepts 1/4. So when they say, oh, well, we regret to inform you, it's not really, because by rejecting you quickly, that means less work for them. We regret to inform you that your manuscript will not be included for publication in our awesome journal at this time. After careful consideration and extensive discussion among the editorial staff, actually it was just me, we feel this paper would be more appropriate for publication in another lesser journal. Obviously, it's not the same. Okay. Although the reviews are not entirely negative, they were pretty bad though. It is evident that the manuscript does not meet our criteria for novelty and impact, i.e., your topic isn't trendy enough. Okay, and then it goes on. It said, although you could address these issues in a revised manuscript after you pick up the pieces of your shattered soul, we must decline without further review, meaning we don't want to read it again, so that you may submit it elsewhere without delay. See how considerate we are. Okay. I'm sorry our response could not be more positive or negative. Our decision in no way reflects any criticism or doubt about the quality of the work you submitted or your work in general. Okay, maybe a little, because obviously you rejected it. Due to the high volume of submissions we received, just rubbing that in your face, and the constraints of space, we must limit the number of articles we select for publication. And that's kind of, well, is it really the case? Because paper is cheap and websites don't have size limits. So are they really limited? And we hope that you will continue to consider our journal for future manuscript submissions, i.e. we are not desperate enough to publish you right now, but we might be desperate in the future. Sincerely, the journal's assistant. Okay, so here is an interpretation of a letter that I've seen this, and it's somewhat annoying. But again, the Chemical Engineering Journal has an impact factor of 10. They invited me to be an editor. And I said, well, yeah, sure, that's fantastic, thank you. So what's involved? Well, you have to look at 150 articles every week on the weekend. I said, well, no, thank you. I mean, it's a huge job. And so these rejection letters facilitate what the editor's monumental task. Now, of course, they could probably have more editors, but there's two sides of it. So, I mean, the rejection letter is a standard, and it's not easy to accept these. Okay. So what we say is this the editor's comment is, it's a smart fridge, honey. Not everything is going to make the cut. Okay. So, you know, everything we do is not going to get to, and the thing is, and maybe there is improvements, and maybe it's not the right journal, and so there's all kinds of things. So I try to personally internalize my failures and accept that they don't get all accepted. But it's funny, I have a friend of mine who is works for Sandia National Labs. She's writing 40, 60, 70 papers. She says she's never been rejected. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. And then I try to tell myself, well, maybe she never gets rejected because she always shoots for low impact factor journals. So it's okay to be rejected. I mean, and I think it's healthy to be rejected. I think you know that you're doing something. You're doing something, and you're shooting for a high impact. So editors have a responsibility to respond, okay, to get our reviewers' comments back fast, and it would be appreciated if they could be more personable. But we understand that in cases where a journal accepts 2,000 to 3,000 papers a year and receives 10,000, that's a difficult task. Now, the publishers, a lot of people are blasting publishers, and I blasted it already, right? I said, hey, they've got 5 that represent 55%. Now, the question is, are the publishers just reaping the benefits, or are they trying to improve? And I would say that, yeah, they're trying to improve. Now they have reviewer guidelines so that reviewers are not so critical, or they're trying to mitigate or let's say make sure that the reviews are not so critical. Okay. They're insisting on author contributions so that you don't have 50 authors and only 2 did all the work. So there's this credit taxonomy. They're also trying to reduce bias, and then we'll look at this, and streamlining the submission process. So this is work in progress. So publishers have initiatives, and they are trying to improve our experience. Okay, and that's important, and it's good to recognize that. Are they there yet? Okay, and the answer is maybe not. So here we've got, in theory, What is the review process? What are publishers telling reviewers to do? They say to be constructive. They say to be open-minded, okay? And they say to highlight areas to improve even when they recommend rejecting, okay? So that's the theory. Now, in reality, the practice is what? Well, the practice is they're unnecessarily negative, okay? I mean, a review has nothing but negative comments. Well, it's a review, but they're unnecessarily negative. Often the comments are vague, and when they're vague, that's unhelpful. And then what's worse is when they contribute opinions, okay, rather than fact. Well, I think you could do this. Well, why? Okay. And so there's this the saying for the journals is that what is the difference between theory and practice? Okay, so this is the theory. What's the difference between theory and practice? Well, the theory is everything is possible. That's the theory. Okay, everything is possible. Okay. In practice, the theory doesn't work. So what you have to do, the publishers have to do, is just not put something on the website and say, here's the reviewer guidelines. I think it has to be, they have to take a bigger role in the review process, okay? And it's because it's not just the journal, it's at the level of the publisher. So now if you go on, you know, this is one of the, let's say, problems is that here is your submitted review or your submitted manuscript, okay? Talking about an article of apples. And then what your reviewer recommends is add some bananas and oranges and green things, okay? So this is where reviewer guidelines are important. I'm talking about apples, I'm not talking about the other things. And this dichotomy, this is all about opinion. And when it's hard to respond to opinion, okay? So, grammatical spelling errors, criticizing English. This is the easiest thing to do, okay? And these are my examples that I got in the last month. There are a lot of misspellings, okay? Misspellings is misspelled. So when somebody tells me I make an error in spelling, at least please have the courtesy to spell it correctly. The written should be improved. Well, that is grammatically incorrect. The writing should be improved. So again, when I see this from people that are not mastering the language, it's annoying. And then we have, however, I find the articles very difficult to read, majorly due to poor English writing style, and requires a major revision proofread by a native speaker with familiarity in chemical engineering. Again, this is one of the reviews that I received, okay? So again, when I look at that, well, it's a 34-word sentence, which is periphrasis, and majorly is not a word. So if you're criticizing it, so what I'm saying to you is everybody criticizes English. It's like as if it's the easiest thing to do, and some people don't get over that, and that's what's really annoying. And we'll look at that in just a second. Now, here's an example of a vague statement. Review overall readability of the text, and sometimes comes out as too informal. What does informal mean? What does readability mean? And again, here, if you underline what the reviewers underline in the text, what they mean by that, that would be helpful. But otherwise, this sentence, this request is vague. The word sometimes is vague. Examples of informal, what does the person mean? The use of the English language can be improved. Again, be specific. what do you mean by the use of the English language? Okay. So then there's the unsubstantiated opinion, difficult to address. And what is that? Well, that's something like, the review provides relevant information, but I'm not convinced of its impact. Well, what are you going to say? What is impact? Is it citations? And it's a review. Therefore, an impact for a review. It's a review. Now, so these unsubstantiated opinions are inappropriate in a review, as long as you substantiate. And so these where I think publishers should have a larger role. Now, of course, they've come up with the credit contributor roles taxonomy. Okay, so here is what they're trying to do is identify who's doing what, because the idea is that only people that have intellectual contribution should be on the article, right? And so what we've got is conceptualization, methodology, software, writing, review, original draft. So these things merit authorship. But often what happens is we get something like this, where you have the PhD student here, and then you have a supervisor and co-supervisor discussing something. You have a postdoctoral fellow. You have a guest author because, you know, you're working with somebody that has to be on this because you're going to be on there. So that's a gift author. Then you got the department head, and this is what happened in Spain with me. The department head was all in all my papers when I was working in Spain. Then you have a classmate, grant principal investigator, and then you have an Anglophone. All right, I'm an Anglophone. So anybody in Russia that wants to publish with me, I'll be your Anglophone. How's that sound? So, so this is unfair, and this idea of the credit or the contributor roles taxonomy is to try to reduce this sort of behavior, and I think it's trying anyway. I mean, again, the journals, the publishers, they're recognizing this, and they're following up, and that's fantastic. But the next thing that the problem is a reviewer bias, okay, and editor bias. So if I work for MIT, then I'm more likely to be, let's say, published in a higher impact factor journal. If I work in a certain country like the United Kingdom and Oxford, I mean, the likelihood of me being rejected outright is so much lower. So publishers have got to work on this. Reputation, somebody that has 15,000 citations and is known in the field is unlikely to be rejected. And then grammar and spelling, okay? This is another reason people are rejected right off the bat. Grammar error, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to reject it. So these editor biases, these publishers have to recognize these biases and they have to address them. So as I was preparing for this talk, I went on the internet and I said, okay, well, let's see what else people are saying. So I listened to this talk by Claire Llewellyn, who is in the United Kingdom. And so she was proposing ways to get papers published in a high impact factor. Her first thing is you must write well. Okay, write well. But then she said things that were, I wasn't sure. She said, not a single typo. Not a single typo. She rejects at the abstract. So to me, that is arrogant, okay? Typos, everybody makes typos. We just said we spent 120 hours getting this thing, and you don't think I can make a typo? And that's a reason to reject? I thought that was severe. Then she said, when struggling, invite a native English speaker to be co-author or pay a scientific writer to edit. Again, that is a tough thing to accept. Tough for me. Now, at the 48th minute, because this was minute 37 or something like this, 30, where she was in discussion. She said, no, but that person has to have an intellectual contribution. But when she said it here, she hadn't said that, but later she did. And then she said, emulate excellence. So, you know, try to write it so that it's accessible and easy to read. And then she said that you can get away with a lot with a beautifully written paper. So, so that what happens is, if it's beautifully written, then substance is less important, which is, again, something that's kind of hard to take. Now, this is an editor who's saying this, and so I think it goes against the grain of what the publisher is saying, but this is something that that has to be addressed. So we've got reviewer and editor bias. I mean, editor bias, that's like, that is annoying. So now what the publishers have done, what we've got is a single blind, meaning that the reviewers are unknown to the authors. So the reviewers are anonymous. Now they're coming up with a double blind. Okay, the double blind is where authors and reviewers are unknown to each other. And they did a pilot, and people from Africa, South America were more likely to be rejected with the double blind, because the reviewers are thinking, oh, well, if they don't want me to know who they are, then it's probably not very good. So that's somewhat annoying. Then you've got the triple blind. Okay, so the editor doesn't know who the authors and the reviewers are. And this is, I think, is like what is really needed, is that the editor can't know who's writing this. Now, if you have a typo, we know you're not, your name is not Chris Lelwin or Claire. So remember, this I think is a neat thing. And then we've got the open. So this is a Wiley pilot where the reviews are published together with the responses. And Wiley's done it a little bit, and I sometimes accept to allow my comments to be published. But it's kind of tough, because I mean, an article takes me at least 4 hours to review it. Now, if I have to go to that level of difficulty of making sure that it's that well written, it's tough. But those initiatives are fantastic. Now, if we go back to the submission acceptance process, again, these are the things that we don't like. Okay. The question again, is it ethical to require exclusivity when submitting an article than taking 6 months to reject? So I'm suggesting that after 3 months, the author should be able to maintain and submit elsewhere. You know, the accelerating the review process, it's got to be a priority, and it is for many. Some journals, and the ones that are high impact journals, have 2-week reviews. So that's fantastic. Now, when you get rejected, you can say, hey, let's go somewhere else. Well, like I told you at the beginning, 15% of all the journals in Web of Science are Wiley or Elsevier. Then we've got Springer has another 14%. And you can look at this. The average impact factor of these journals is 3.9, 2.4 for Springer. Then we've got Wiley, average impact factor 2.08. They've got 1,206 journals, 10%. Then we got Taylor and Francis, lower impact factor. And then we've got Sage with 5%. So, you know, these are fair to high impact factor journals, and that's 55%. So you can go elsewhere. So let's look at the other. You can go to universities and societies, but there's 1,200 of those, average impact factor of 1.5, not very high. Then you can go to the American and British. If you have American or British in the title, well, guess what? They've got an impact factor of 4.5. There's 700 of them. So that's like key. So American Society and British Society impact factors are higher. But Wiley and Elsevier are picking these up, like the IET journal, IET It's over 100 years old. Wiley is now publishing this journal, so it's no longer independent. Then you've got small publishing houses with an impact factor average of 1.6, and then you've got 14 medium there among the the ones that I mentioned before. So one of the other things that people pretend is that open access means higher impact factor. Well, that's untrue. So this is 2010. There were 2,600 journals, open access, and only 274 were in the first quartile in terms of citations. Most of them were in the lower quartile. And then, of course, it's progressing. Okay, so we've got up until 2013, 2015, 2017. So here we've got 4,000 journals. Now here there's only 200, but here now we have 700 journals in the top quartile. So that's good improvement, but still 50% of all the journals are in the bottom, more than 50%. And more recently in 2019, there was a huge jump. So that we got 5,000, so 1,000 journals of the 5,000 are in the top quartile. But the idea that, oh, I'm going to be open access and I'm going to have a lot more citations, that is incorrect. So the open access for me is something that's difficult. It's difficult to ask somebody to spend 150 hours and then say, okay, now you got to spend another $3,000, $4,000 to publish your work. I think that's difficult. So I'm going to conclude now, and I'm going to say that publishing is far from gratifying. Okay. It should be gratifying, but it's not. Okay. And one way of your punishment must be more severe. This is from The Dark Knight. Okay. More severe punishment is a second review or third review. Editors with their English language bias, we really have to address that. Otherwise, learn English grammar you must. Okay. Reviewers need training. I mean, they absolutely need training. Okay, here we've got Dumbledore. Okay, training is the answer for reviewers. The question is, are publishers too powerful? Okay, what do you think? And finally, I would say that open access is a promise of citation. You promise. So I would like to thank everybody, спасибо. And it was fun preparing this presentation for this fantastic forum. I've asked all my students to come here and sit in with me. And so that's why I've always been turning to the right here. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Грегори, спасибо большое за потрясающую презентацию и за великолепное иллюстрирование материала. Это было очень трогательно.